You ever stood at the edge of a river, watched it roll by steady like no hurry, no pause? You ever notice how that water don't stop to ask the rock upstream why it's rougher or the pebble downstream why it's smoother? It just flows. It just keeps on being a river, man. It doesn't apologize for the current. It's got to wish it was somebody else's rain. Now, here's the truth. Ain't no two rivers carved the same canyon. Ain't no two stars burning the same light. And you're sitting there staring at somebody else's map, trying to navigate your own wilderness like it's a detour. But here's the thing about detours, friend, they're still part of the ride. See, comparison's a thief. It'll steal the sunrise right out your morning. You start measuring your harvest against your neighbor's field, and suddenly you're tallying blessings like they're debts. But life ain't a ledger. It's a story. And nobody gets to write your chapters but you. You want to know why the oak don't fret over the pine growing taller? Because it's too busy being an oak. Roots deep, branches wide, leaves whispering secrets to the wind that only it understands. You think that oak's worried about how fast the birch is shooting up next door? Nah. It's got its own seasons to tend to, its own storms to weather, its own sky to reach for. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. We're all out here bumping into each other's shadows, tripping over expectations, ours and everybody else's. But here's the twist. Those shadows only exist because there's light somewhere. Your light. And the moment you stop squinting at somebody else's glow is the moment you start seeing how bright your own flame can burn. So next time you catch yourself eyeing another's garden, remember soil's different everywhere. Some folks' dirt's got more clay. Some got more sand. Doesn't mean your seeds ain't going to grow. Doesn't mean your blooms ain't going to matter. You just got to trust the ground you're planted in. Water your own roots. And if you ever forget, just go back to that river. Watch how it twists, how it bends, how it don't ever stop to argue with its own path. It just keeps on moving, carving its name into the earth one ripple at a time. Be the river, friend, not the reflection. Ever stood by a river? I mean, really stood there, boots in the mud, eyes locked on that current. Watched how it don't ask permission to roll. How it don't apologize for the rocks it crashes into or the quiet pools it lingers in. It just goes. Ain't worried about the reflection it casts on the surface. Ain't trying to mirror the clouds or the trees leaning over the bank. It's got a deeper truth to tend to the truth of its own flow. Now, let's talk about that reflection. See, the river's reflection is a liar. A beautiful one, sure, shimmery, poetic, all dressed up in borrowed light, but a liar all the same. It'll show you the sky inside down, make the weeds look like they're dancing, turn a jagged cliff into a soft smudge. But the river ain't fooled. It knows the reflection ain't the thing. The reflection is just what happens when light gets curious. The river's too busy being the river to care how pretty it looks doing it. So why do we get so hung up on our own reflections? Why are we staring at the surface, judging our worth by how we stack up against the mirage next to us? You ever stand in a crowd and feel like a thumbprint smudged on a masterpiece? Like you're the wrong shade of green in a forest that's supposed to be perfect? That's the reflection talking. That's you holding up a mirror to somebody else's light and calling it your own shadow. Here's the rub. The river don't stop when the weather changes. When the rain comes hard, it rises. When the drought hits, it digs deeper. It don't look at the mountain stream and say, man, why ain't I that fast? It don't glance at the pond and sigh. Must be nice to be that still. It just does what rivers do, carves canyons, carries life, turns mill wheels and canyon walls into the same damn current. It's got no time for what if, it's too busy with what is. But us, we're out here tacking selfies in the funhouse mirrors. We're measuring our lives against highlight reels and filtered sunsets. Thinking if we just paddle harder, we'll catch up to that guy's kayak. If we just smooth out the ripples, we'll look as calm as that yoga guru on Instagram. But here's what we're missing. The reflection ain't the work. The reflection is the distraction. The real work's underneath. The real work's the flow. You ever notice how a river's got its own voice? Not the babble you hear from the bank. I'm talking about the low, humming truth of it. The vibration you feel in your chest when you wade out waist deep, that's the river's real song. It's not meant for everybody. It's not meant to be pretty. It's meant to be true. And that's the thing we forget when we're busy comparing our reflection to somebody else's. We mute our own hum We trade our current for a snapshot. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. Calls himself a river, but for years he was stuck in the reflection. Spent his 20s trying to be a copy of his daddy's legacy, tried to build the same kind of business, wear the same kind of boots, marry the same kind of love. Problem was his daddy was a desert cactus, thrived on friction, bloomed in the dry heat. My friend, he's a mangrove, needs salt water, tangled roots, storms that bend him sideways. Took him till he was damn near 40 to stop staring at his old man's reflection in the water and start digging his own roots into the mud he was standing in. That's the thing about rivers, they don't follow paths, they make him. They take the rain they're given, the snow melt, the runoff, and they say, all right, let's see where this goes. They don't get jealous of the clouds for making the rain. They don't resent the ocean for being the finish line. They just roll. And when they hit a boulder, they don't quit. They swirl, they chisel. They find a way around, under, over, through. They turn obstacles into part of the story. So what's it mean to be the river, not the reflection? It means stop tacking your temperature against somebody else's weather. Stop holding your life up to the light and squinting for flaws. The river ain't got time for that. It's too busy carrying the leaves, polishing the stones, keeping the herons fed. It's too busy being what it is, a force, a rhythm, a heartbeat wrapped in water. You want to know the secret the river's known all along. You already are the river. You've just been spending too much time gazing at the surface, wondering why your reflection don't look like the others. But the others ain't the point. The reflection ain't the thing. The thing is the flow. The thing is the truth under the surface. The thing is showing up day after day and saying, here's my current, here's my song, here's the mud I'm made of. The world will try to sell you mirrors. Don't buy them. The world will try to tell you there's a right way to bend. Don't listen. You ain't here to be a pretty picture on quiet water. You're here to move. To dig. To roar when you need to and whisper when you have to. To leave a mark that can't be wiped away by the next breeze. So let me ask you again, you ever stood at the edge of a river? Felt that hum in your bones? That's you, friend. That's the river in you. The one that's been there all along under the reflection beyond the noise. The one that knows the way home. You're in the driver's seat of your own life. This is something we often forget. We look at the lives of others and feel like we're not where we should be, but the truth is that no one else has the same set of experiences, skills, and circumstances that you do. You are driving your own story, and no one else is steering it but you. Life isn't some race where you're meant to follow others and match their pace. It's about you, your choices, and where you decide to take it. There's no one-size-fits-all for success, happiness, or fulfillment. You've got a map that only you can read, and you're the only one who can navigate through the terrain. It's easy to get distracted by the lives of others, especially in the age of social media where everyone's highlight reel is always on display. We scroll through endless posts of perfect vacations, flawless careers, and picture-perfect relationships, and it's natural to wonder why we don't have those things. But here's the thing, while others may be in the passenger seat or the back seat of their own journey, you are behind the wheel of yours. The road is yours to choose, the speed is yours to control, and the destination is yours to define. The idea that someone else's path is the right path for you is a misconception we all sometimes buy into. But the truth is, what works for someone else might not work for you. We each have a unique set of needs, desires, and opportunities that shape our lives. Comparing yourself to someone else is like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's uncomfortable, frustrating, and ultimately it won't fit. Your life is meant to be lived your way, on your terms, even if it looks different from everyone else's. And let's talk about speed for a moment. The race we think we're in, the one we're constantly trying to keep up with, isn't about going faster than anyone else. It's not about getting ahead of others. It's about your pace. It's about knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. There are times in life when you need to push yourself, take risks, and chase after your goals at full speed. But there are also times when you need to pause, take a breath, and reassess. This is something that other people's lives won't teach you. Their pace might not be your pace, and that's okay. When you realize that you are the driver, everything starts to change. You stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to move forward. You stop feeling like you need to explain your choices to others. You start taking ownership of your path, and with that comes the confidence to make decisions based on what feels right to you, not based on what you think will look good to others. And here's the thing about making your own choices: you will make mistakes along the way. It's part of the process. But that's where the growth happens. Every turn, every dump, and every detour is an opportunity to learn more about yourself, about what you want, and about the kind of life you want to create. As you sit behind the wheel of your own life, it's important to remember that you don't need anyone else's approval. You don't need anyone else's validation. The moment you realize that, you break free from the pressures that come from comparison. The road becomes clearer, the weight on your shoulders lightens, and you can finally see the path ahead without worrying about who else is walking beside you. The truth is, no one else's opinion matters when it comes to the direction you take. You are the only one who has the power to determine that. And let's not forget about the power of timing. Timing is a huge part of driving your own life. Sometimes it's about waiting for the right moment to make a move. We've all had those times when we felt like we're stuck or moving slower than others, but what's actually happening is that we're waiting for the right conditions. Maybe it's not your time to accelerate yet, and that's fine. There's no need to rush. When you understand that timing isn't something you need to force, you free yourself from the pressure of trying to keep up with others. You realize that there's no wrong time to be where you are, and that in itself is incredibly freeing. So, what does it mean to be in the driver's seat of your own life? It means that you accept full responsibility for your decisions, knowing that they come with their own set of challenges, but also their own rewards. It means you don't let others steer you off course, no matter how tempting it might be to follow the crowd. It means that you own your path, even when it looks different from what society or anyone else expects. It's about embracing the freedom that comes with knowing that your journey is yours and yours alone, and that's where the magic happens. You stop worrying about everyone else's ride and start enjoying your own. We are all wired differently, and that's something to celebrate. Too often we find ourselves wishing we were more like someone else, wishing we had their talent, their luck, their success. We look at people who seem to have it all and wonder why things are different for us. But here's the truth. The very things that make you different are the things that make you special. Your individuality isn't a flaw. It's your superpower. The world doesn't need another version of someone else. It needs you, the real unapologetic you. When you take a step back and really think about it, you begin to see the beauty in the fact that everyone's journey is different. Your path is yours alone, and no one else's experiences will ever match yours exactly. The relationships you form, the lessons you learn, the struggles you face, and the way you overcome them, that's all part of your unique story. What other people go through is part of their own story, and while there may be overlap, there will never be a perfect match. The things that set you apart from everyone else are the very things that will lead you to where you're meant to be. This doesn't mean you should never learn from others or that inspiration from someone else's journey isn't valuable. Of course, you can be inspired by others, and it's natural to admire people who've achieved things you aspire to. But it's important to keep in mind that you're not trying to duplicate someone else's life. Your aim shouldn't be to follow in someone else's footsteps, but to carve your own path. Embrace the qualities that make you who you are, even if they seem odd, unconventional, or out of place. It's these very qualities that will give you the strength to handle challenges, see opportunities where others might miss them, and ultimately create something that no one else can replicate. If you spend all your time comparing yourself to others, you'll miss the gifts that come with being yourself. The more you try to fit into someone else's mold, the less likely you are to find true satisfaction. That's because true fulfillment comes from living authentically, from embracing the things that make you different. No one else can do what you do, think the way you think, or create the way you create. Your perspective is completely unique, and that's where your value lies. There's something about the way you approach life, relationships, and challenges that no one else will ever be able to replicate. Think about it this way: the world is full of people who try to be someone they're not because they think that's the key to success, happiness, or acceptance. But in trying to imitate others, they lose sight of their own strength, their own potential. You don't need to blend in to stand out. Being authentic means you're not trying to hide behind someone else's success. You're creating your own, you're paving your own way, and when you fully embrace your individuality, that's when the real magic happens.
The enemy fears a woman who prays. He knows her power. He knows her authority. He knows that when she prays, all of heaven stands behind her. That's why he fights so hard to silence her. He throws distractions her way. He fills her mind with doubt. He weighs her down with discouragement because he knows that if she opens her mouth in faith, his schemes will fall apart. The enemy is strategic. He knows that a praying woman is dangerous. She's not just speaking words, she's releasing power. Power to break chains. Power to shift atmospheres. Power to change destinies. Her prayers are weapons that tear down strongholds, that dismantle his lies, that render his attacks powerless. Look at Deborah, a woman of faith, a woman of prayer, a woman who led a nation to victory. The enemy feared her because she knew who her God was. She didn't lead with an army of strength. She led with an army of faith. She spoke the word of God and victory followed. Her prayers went before her in battle, paving the way for triumph. The enemy knows that a praying woman is relentless. She doesn't quit when it gets hard. She doesn't give up when she doesn't see the answer right away. She presses in. She fights on her knees. She declares God's promises even when her situation says the opposite. And that terrifies him because he knows that her faith moves mountains. Her faith calls down fire from heaven. Her faith brings the impossible into reality. Think about Hannah. Year after year, she prayed for a child. The enemy tried to break her. He tried to silence her through mockery and shame, but she kept praying. She kept believing. She kept trusting God. And her persistence brought forth Samuel, a prophet who changed the course of history. The enemy feared her prayers because he knew the power of her faith. The enemy isn't afraid of a woman who complains. He isn't afraid of a woman who worries. He isn't afraid of a woman who doubts, but he trembles before a woman who prays. Because her prayers release God's power. Her prayers activate angelic armies. Her prayers build hedges of protection around her loved ones. Her prayers break generational curses. Her prayers open doors that no man can shut. He knows that her prayers can reach places she cannot go. They can touch hearts she cannot touch. They can change circumstances she cannot change. He knows that her prayers echo in eternity, shaping destinies, altering futures, and bringing heaven's will to earth. That's why he tries to silence her. He fills her mind with lies. Your prayers don't matter. Nothing's changing. God doesn't hear you. He wants her to give up. He wants her to stop believing because he knows that the moment she stops praying, his attacks go unchallenged. His lies go unchecked. His plans go unopposed. But a praying woman knows better. She knows that her prayers are powerful and effective. She knows that her words carry weight in the spiritual realm. She knows that when she prays, God listens. God moves. God fights on her behalf. Look at Esther. One woman's prayer changed the fate of an entire nation. The enemy plotted to destroy her people, but her prayers overturned his plans. She stood in the gap. She fasted. She prayed. And God delivered her people from certain death. The enemy feared her prayers because they unleashed God's power to save and to deliver. A praying woman isn't easily shaken. She's anchored in God's promises. She's rooted in his word. She knows that no weapon formed against her will prosper. She knows that the battle is not hers, but the Lord's. She knows that she's more than a conqueror through Christ who loves her. Her prayers are her shield. Her prayers are her sword. Her prayers are her strategy. She doesn't fight with flesh and blood. She fights in the spirit. She pulls down strongholds. She casts down imaginations. She speaks life over death. She declares victory over defeat. The enemy fears a praying woman because she is unstoppable. She fights from a place of victory, knowing that her God is greater, stronger, and mightier than any force of darkness. She prays with authority, knowing that she is seated in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. She prays with boldness, knowing that her words carry the power of life and death. Her prayers build hedges of protection around her family. They cancel the enemy's assignments. They create pathways in the wilderness. They release healing where there is sickness. They release peace where there is chaos. They release joy where there is sorrow. The enemy knows that when she prays, his plans are exposed. His lies are defeated. His strongholds are destroyed. That's why he fears her. That's why he tries to stop her. Because he knows that as long as she prays, he cannot win. God defends and fights for those who call on him. He is a refuge, a fortress, a shield for those who trust in him. When a woman prays, she isn't fighting alone. She's summoning the Lord of hosts, the God of angel armies, to step into her battle. Her strength isn't in her own power, it's in the one who fights for her. Look at Jehoshaphat. Surrounded by enemies, outnumbered and outmatched, he didn't gather his army first. He prayed. He sought God. And God answered. The battle is not yours but mine. When he led his people in worship, God ambushed their enemies. They didn't lift a sword, yet they won the victory. God fought for them because they called on him. That's the power of prayer. It invites God to intervene. It invites his strength to overcome weakness, his wisdom to outsmart the enemy, his power to do what seems impossible. A praying woman understands this. She knows that her battle isn't against flesh and blood. It's against principalities and powers. And she knows that the weapons of her warfare are not carnal but mighty through God. She doesn't fight her battles in her own strength. She fights on her knees. She fights with faith. She fights by calling on the name of the Lord. And when she does, God rises on her behalf. He scatters her enemies. He silences her accusers. He protects her from every attack. Look at Hagar, rejected, abandoned, left to die in the wilderness. But she called on God and he heard her cry. He provided water in the desert. He promised her a future. He defended her when no one else would. He fought for her and her child because she called on his name. The enemy knows that when a woman prays, she is never alone. She is backed by heaven's armies. She is surrounded by God's presence. She is covered by his protection. He cannot touch her because she is hidden under the shadow of the Almighty. That's why he tries to discourage her, to make her feel isolated, to make her feel defeated. But she knows that her defender is greater than any enemy. She knows that her God is a warrior. He split the Red Sea for Moses. He brought down the walls of Jericho for Joshua. He shut the mouths of lions for Daniel, and he will fight for her too. He will part the waters that try to drown her. He will bring down the walls that stand in her way. He will protect her from the schemes of the enemy. Look at Ruth, a foreigner, a widow, with no protection and no provision. But she called on the God of Israel, and he fought for her. He provided Boaz as her kinsman redeemer. He restored her hope. He secured her future. She went from brokenness to blessing because God defended her when she had no one else to fight for her. When a woman prays, God takes up her cause. He becomes her advocate. He becomes her shield. He becomes her refuge. He stands between her and the storm. He stands between her and the enemy. He stands between her and every weapon formed against her. The battle may be fierce. The opposition may be strong, but she doesn't fight alone. God goes before her. He levels mountains. He breaks through gates of bronze. He shatters bars of iron. He makes crooked places straight. He fights every battle so she can stand in victory. A praying woman doesn't live in fear. She knows that God is her defender. She knows that his angels encamp around her. She knows that no harm can come near her dwelling. She knows that even if she walks through the valley of the shadow of death, she will fear no evil because God is with her. Look at Mary Magdalene, possessed by 7 demons, tormented and oppressed, but she encountered Jesus. She called on his name and he set her free. He defended her from her accusers. He restored her dignity. He fought for her and gave her a new beginning. She became the first to witness his resurrection because he fought for her freedom. God doesn't just defend her from the outside attacks. He fights the battles within. He calms her anxious thoughts. He heals her broken heart. He strengthens her weary soul. He gives her peace that surpasses understanding. He gives her joy that the world cannot take away. When a woman calls on God, she stands secure. Not because of who she is, but because of who her defender is. He is her rock. He is her fortress. He is her deliverer. And no enemy can stand against him. No weapon can prosper. No curse can prevail. She may be surrounded by trouble, but she is surrounded by God's presence. She may be attacked on all sides, but God fights on all sides. She may be weak, but he is her strength. She may feel small, but he is her great defender.